Imagine, you're at a wild foam party, relaxing in the pool with a cocktail in your hand. Everything around you is festive, music is playing, people are laughing, and it seems that nothing can spoil this carefree moment. However, suddenly the water level drops sharply. At first, it looks like someone's silly joke, as if someone opened the drain as a prank. But after a couple of seconds, you see a real whirlpool forming in the middle of the pool. The current gets faster and faster, turning into a swirling vortex that literally pulls you down. You try to hold on, clinging to the edge, but the force of the current is too powerful. In an instant, you are sucked into the hole under the pool. Here, the fun turns into a real nightmare. You are suffocating, banging against the rocks, feeling the sharp edges tearing your skin. Muddy water fills your mouth and nose. You lose your bearings, unable to tell which way is up and which is down. Your hands and feet are scraped raw, your breathing is labored, and the current won't let you go. Cuts, broken bones, excruciating pain, and finally, darkness. This is how Khalil Kimi from Israel died. This is not a fairy tale, but a real tragedy. There is a recording, but the camera turned on after he was sucked into the sinkhole. The footage shows another guy nearby barely escaping the same fate. Khalil's body was later found at a depth of 13 meters in a sinkhole under the pool. This story reminds us that death can strike in the most unexpected places, even where you feel safe. However, swimming pools are far from the only place where leisure can turn into tragedy. On February 28, 2020, Russian blogger Ekaterina Didenko was celebrating her birthday in a sauna. The party was like something out of a postcard. Balloons, laughter, champagne, friends. To make the video look more impressive, the guests poured dry ice into a small pool to create a smoky effect on camera. It seemed like a brilliant idea. White fog, atmospheric mystery, the perfect shot for social media. Dry ice is carbon dioxide in solid form. The temperature of the substance is approximately -79 degrees. It is usually used to freeze food or create stage smoke. But none of the guests knew that this effect is only safe in the open air with an influx of oxygen. In a closed room, everything is different. When ice hits water, it instantly sublimates, filling the room with carbon dioxide and displacing oxygen. In the video, everyone is having fun, laughing, dressing up in scientist costumes. No one suspects that in a few minutes the party will turn into a tragedy. As soon as the dry ice hit the water, a thick fog enveloped the room. Two men rushed into the clouds of steam and disappeared into the white haze. A few seconds later, the recording cuts off. The room became unbreathable. People began to suffocate and lose consciousness. Those who managed to get out ran into the street, but it was too late. Two men died on the spot, and the blogger's husband died in hospital. Sometimes death comes not from a simple mistake, but from a fateful coincidence. On January 27, 2023, a technician named Kevin Holding was doing his usual job in central London. He was servicing a retractable public urinal. These cubicles are hidden underground during the day and rise at night. That day, the mechanism suddenly activated while Kevin was inside. The heavy metal cubicle began to descend, crushing the man. Firefighters tried to pull him out for more than 2 hours, but were unable to save him. He was literally crushed. It was later determined that death was caused by asphyxiation, pressure compressing the chest and preventing oxygen from reaching the lungs. This tragedy shocked even experienced rescuers. But there are even more horrific cases when a person is not only crushed but also burned alive. In 1998, at the Harvest One bakery in Walsall, England, two engineers, David Mace and Ian Erickson, arrived for their shift expecting a normal day. They were tasked with inspecting a faulty mechanism inside a huge dough mixer. According to the rules, the unit had to cool down before repair, but in order not to waste time, the management turned on forced cooling with fans. 2 hours after the oven was turned off, the temperature was still high, but the engineers were ordered to start work. They climbed inside through the lower opening to reach the conveyor. It was stuffy inside, and the metal was still hot. Erickson reported via radio that it was too hot inside. But at that moment, the mechanism suddenly started working. The furnace started up, and the men were trapped. It was impossible to stop the process, The system was operating automatically. They had to endure agonizing minutes. For 17 long minutes, the temperature remained around 100 degrees. Both suffered burns that were incompatible with life. These stories are like a nightmare, but each one is real. And all this happened not on the edge of fantasy, but in ordinary places where no one expected trouble. The most dangerous traps are not always wild forests or oceans. Sometimes they are familiar things: a swimming pool, a sauna, a toilet, or even a bread oven. Be vigilant. These cases teach us to be careful. Check your equipment, follow the rules, don't risk your health for the sake of content. Even everyday objects can sometimes become a deadly threat. Always take care of yourself and your loved ones. Once you are on board an airplane, there is virtually no way back. You are in a confined space, dependent on the work of people and mechanisms, and if something goes wrong, it will be impossible to get out. On December 16, 2016, an incident occurred in Mumbai, India, that showed how unpredictable airport service can sometimes be. A ground service worker named Rave Subramaniam was on the runway, signaling to the pilots of an aircraft that was about to leave the parking area. The crew was in a hurry. The flight was delayed. In the commotion, the pilots did not notice that there were 4 other technical crew members near the aircraft. Some managed to move away, but Rave was standing with his back to the engine. In a matter of seconds, he was sucked into the jet stream. It all happened in an instant. He didn't have time to scream or jump out of the way. Only his clothes remained. His colleagues were in shock, the pilots were distraught, and the subsequent investigation revealed that the tragedy was caused by haste and a violation of safety regulations. But this event is just one of many. Airports around the world have been the scene of many horrific incidents, some of which seem like something out of a movie. On August 10, 2018, surveillance cameras at Seattle-Tacoma Airport in Washington state captured something incredible. The recording shows a passenger plane slowly taxiing towards the runway. Everything looked normal until the air traffic controllers realized that this plane was not supposed to take off at all. They tried to contact the pilot, but there was no response. It soon became clear that the plane had been hijacked by an employee. The hijacker turned out to be 29-year-old Richard Russell, an airport ground service employee. In the morning, he passed security, started his shift, chatted with colleagues, then disappeared for several hours, locking himself in the toilet. Seizing the opportunity, he made his way into the cockpit of one of the planes he had recently towed himself. Dispatchers begged him to stop, but Richard firmly stated that he just wanted to fly. He did not have a pilot's license and had not undergone the appropriate training. When the plane took off, an alarm was raised throughout the airfield. All flights were urgently canceled, and 2 F-15 fighter jets took to the sky to intercept it. But Richard had no intention of fighting. He was simply performing aerobatic maneuvers, rolls, loops, sharp turns. He even joked over the radio that he was flying like in a GTA mission and complained that he was bored. It seemed as if he was deliberately putting on an absurd show in the last minutes of his life. The military tried to persuade him to steer the plane towards the ocean, where the landing could be relatively soft. But Richard replied that everything has already been decided, and that his loved ones would be disappointed to learn of what he had done. Those were his last words. A few minutes later, the plane crashed on the small island of Kitron. Richard Russell died on the spot. However, even professional pilots are not immune to mistakes. On February 15, 2023, passengers on Yeti Airlines Flight 691 from Kathmandu to Pokhara were filming a live broadcast. Among them was blogger Sanj Joswal, who was broadcasting on Facebook. The footage shows peaceful skies, snow-capped Himalayan peaks, and smiling faces. No one could have imagined that, in just a few minutes, this flight would become one of the most tragic plane crashes in Nepal's history. The camera suddenly began to shake. Screams rang out in the cabin. Then there was a flash and fire filled the frame. The video cut off. Later, experts concluded that 2 minutes before the crash, Captain Anju Kadavada gave the order to release the flaps to reduce speed before landing. But the co-pilot mistakenly moved the throttle lever. The engine switched to minimum power. The plane lost lift and crashed. 72 people, including 2 children, died in the crash. This video became the last recording of many lives, a random fragment of a live broadcast that turned into evidence of a terrible mistake. Each of these stories reminds us that there are no absolutely safe places. Even where everything seems to be under control, at airports, on runways, and in aircraft cabins, one wrong move can cost lives. People rely on machines, systems, and protocols, but the human factor remains the weakest and most dangerous link in any system. And it doesn't matter whether you're on the ground or in the sky. Sometimes the line between life and death is thinner than the window pane. Remember this and don't neglect safety measures. Pay attention to those around you, and don't leave dominant systems without proper checks. Sometimes it saves lives. Always. However, even this incident was not the most terrible death that can befall a person in the sky. In 2016, a video appeared showing a smiling young man preparing for his first parachute jump. His name was Tyler Turner, and he was only 18 years old. A mild form of cerebral palsy did not prevent him from playing sports, being active, making plans, and enjoying life. The camera captured the moment when he was standing at the Skydive Folsom Parachute Club, smiling and waiting for his turn. The voice behind the jump was performed in tandem with a 25-year-old instructor named Ewan Kwan, who claimed to have made more than 700 jumps. The plane climbed to an altitude of about 4,000 meters. The door swung open, and the pair stepped into the void. Everything went according to plan until, at the critical moment, Ewan failed to open the main parachute. Video footage taken from the ground shows them accelerating in their fall, with neither canopy opening. Tyler died instantly, and his mother, who was standing in the observation area, saw with her own eyes how. Further investigation revealed that Ewan Kwan was not authorized to work as an instructor. His documents were found to be fake, and he was on probation without training in emergency procedures. The owner of the center, who had tried to cover up the violations in exchange for profit, was found guilty and ordered to pay a huge compensation to Tyler's family, $40 million. Stories like this are a chain of fateful coincidences and human errors that destroy lives in an instant. But there are even more mysterious deaths, sometimes almost mystical, as if reality itself is interfering in a terrible plot. One such story is associated with a woman named Mary Cerruti from Houston. She lived alone in a small house in the Heights neighborhood, surrounded by her many cats. Mary was a reserved but kind and tidy housekeeper who rarely left her little castle. Therefore, her neighbors did not notice for a long time that something strange had happened to her in 2015. The first to become concerned was a neighbor. He noticed a broken window, overgrown grass on the property, and a pile of unopened mail in the letterbox. Knowing how meticulous she was about housekeeping, he called the police. When the officers opened the house, they were met with silence and the smell of decay. Mary herself had disappeared. The cats, left unattended, had almost all died. Relatives filed a missing person report, but the investigation stalled. Almost 2 years passed. The house was put up for sale, the belongings were removed, and the property passed to another owner. In 2017, the new tenant, while renovating, moved a wardrobe and discovered a hole in the wall. Looking into the narrow cavity, he found a human skeleton. The bones had been gnawed by rats, and the remains of glasses and clothing lay nearby. The police arrived immediately. Based on the results of the examination and comparison of photographs, it was established that the remains belonged to Mary Cerruti. The question arose, how did she get there? There were no signs of a struggle, and the windows and door were locked from the inside. Some relatives suggested murder. In Mary's old photos, they found pictures of a high-rise building under construction next to her house, something she had called a cause for concern. The woman complained about the noise and dust, and the developer persistently offered to buy her plot of land. Perhaps someone decided to get rid of their annoying neighbor. However, the investigation had a different version. A broken board was found in the attic, under which there was a gap, right above the place where the remains were later found. Perhaps Mary accidentally fell into this opening, got stuck in the narrow cavity and died of thirst and suffocation, unable to send a signal. But the mystery remains. Who broke the window that the neighbor reported? Was it her desperate attempt to escape, or was someone trying to cover their tracks? This story still sparks debate. Some are convinced that Mary was the victim of a crime, while others believe it was an accident. But the fact remains. She was found only 2 years later, and the mystery of how she ended up in the wall is unlikely to ever be solved. Such cases make us wonder how many more secrets are hidden in the walls of our homes, stairwells, and attics. We live believing that we control our destiny, but sometimes it turns out in the darkest way possible. Perhaps you too have been on the brink of death without realizing it. Share your story. It may save someone's life. And remember, even the most frightening stories can serve as a warning if we learn from them. These stories are not just scary headlines, but real lives that remain behind the scenes. They remind us that even minor negligence, gaps in the control system, and human carelessness can have irreversible consequences. Take care of your loved ones, do not turn a blind eye to danger, and pay attention to signs that may seem insignificant but could save someone's life. Do not ignore even the smallest signals,